Hi, I've never done one of these reaction videos before, but I thought I had a duty to do one in response to a video by a black belt barrister called You Be the Judge. And it's about an incident between a bike and a car. And I was a little bit alarmed at the conclusion that the barrister came to, and also lots of the comments in the video. So what I'd like to do is give my perspective as someone who rides a lot around cars in traffic and someone who drives a lot around bikes in traffic. And if you do that, you have a very definite realization about who's the most vulnerable and who's the most responsible in those circumstances and why people do what they do. So let's go through the video, and I'll pause it at various points to give my take.
Driver's fault or the cyclist's fault? There's a huge debate going on over on X about this video here, which I believe was originally posted on Upride, and it's between this Range Rover and this cyclist. Lots of people are saying it's 100% the driver's fault, but some people may also feel that it's the cyclist's fault. Let me play the video for you first, and then I'll give you from a legal perspective what I really think about all of this, because some people don't, with respect, don't seem to be able to get their head around it. But watch the video first. So this Range Rover comes a line, the cyclist reaches out, touches the vehicle to say, I'm this close. But then the cyclist carries on, the vehicle carries on, but then the cyclist wanders in front of the vehicle and gets knocked down. Thankfully, it doesn't appear that the cyclist is injured, but the cycle is then underneath the wheel of the vehicle, and then lots of people are saying it's 100% the driver's fault.
Okay, first of all, good luck with this guy. He just needs a bit of a beard. Could be a brother from another mother. But let's just...
Legal perspective, what I really think about all of this, because some people don't, with respect, don't seem to be able to get their head around it. But watch the video first.
Okay, there, if there's a car that comes alongside you at that kind of distance, you are instantly alarmed. You are very worried about what's going to happen, because you don't know if they're going to swerve in front of you. You don't know if they're going to try and squeeze you into the curb. You have no idea what they're going to do, and you have no idea if they've seen you at all. So when that distance there, it might look a little bit wider on this video, but that is very, very near. If you can reach out and touch the car that you are nearby, then it's way too close, and you are really scared when that happens.
So this Range Rover comes...
So absolutely, I would do this. I would bang on the window of the car, because you are thinking this person's going to take me out any second, and I need to warn them as quick as possible that they're about to take me out. So banging on the window is a very natural reaction, and it's something that you think might save your life at that time.
A line, the cyclist reach out, touch.
There we go. So as he does that, the car then slows down, because to the cyclist, I hate saying cyclist because there's no such thing as a cyclist, but to the person on the bike, they now have alerted the driver that they're there. They think, okay, hazard over a little bit. They're going to now back off. Now they've realised I'm here and I've got the line again. And they really shouldn't be coming here, because we both know, or we both should know, that there's not enough room.
Touches the vehicle to say, I'm this close. But then the cyclist carries on, the vehicle carries on, but then the cyclist wanders in front of the vehicle and gets knocked down.
No, the cyclist does not wander in front of the vehicle. The cyclist has primary position, which you are supposed to do. You are supposed to take the line. You are supposed to get in front of cars to make sure that they can't overtake you. It is part of the highway code. It is part of cycling knowledge. It's on UK websites for the government. That you should move to the middle of the road to ensure that cars cannot go past you in an unsafe manner.
The cyclist reach out, touches the vehicle
to say,
I'm this close. But then the cyclist carries on.
The person on the bike there, as far as they're aware, that person now in the car has pulled back. They've gone a lot slower, and now they're able to move over into primary position to ensure that that person can't attempt another unsafe overtake.
The vehicle carries on, but then the cyclist wanders in front of the vehicle and gets knocked down. Thankfully, it doesn't appear that the cyclist is injured, but the cycle is then underneath the wheel of the vehicle, and then lots of people are saying it's 100% the driver's fault.
It is 100% the driver's fault.
Let me explain just for a moment, and then I'll go back to the video and hopefully you can see it again and understand what I'm talking about. But there's a principle in law called contributory negligence. Now, that warrants a very basic understanding of what negligence is in the first place. Negligence is when you have a duty of care to someone else, and if you're a road user, you have a general duty of care to anyone else on the road. If you're caring for somebody, or even it comes from the old neighbor duty of care principle. You have a duty to take reasonable care of other people. And that includes, for your property, it includes trespassers to your land. You have reasonable duty to make sure they are not coming to danger. So you can't set traps even for trespassers, by way of example. If you breach that duty of care, then you may well be negligent in your duty of care. But then if that goes on to cause injury to somebody else, then they can claim damages against you.
This is all fair enough. This is, I absolutely accept this. But in this particular instance, this is nothing to do with it, because the person on the bike took all reasonable care there to protect themselves from an unsafe overtake. And as far as they were aware, the person in the car had then backed off and had given up on their unsafe overtake. When the official advice from the government, from the UK government, is in those kind of situations to move out into primary position, to stop that kind of thing happening. I know this is America, but we're talking a UK barrister here. Then none of that duty of care towards yourself, it comes into it. It doesn't even get that far.
The one area that most people, most claims fall foul is the causation aspect. So, for example, take a medical negligence case. A doctor may be negligent in performing their duties. So they obviously have a duty of care. They may have not acted with the requisite standards. Therefore, they may be in breach of their duty of care. But if that patient, for example, then dies, but it's not their negligence that caused them to die or to get injured, then the claim for damages is likely to fail.
I understand what he's saying. The car should never have been there in the first place. The car started all of this and ended all of this by being in the wrong place. The person on the bike did nothing wrong.
Because there's no causation there. So then how does contributory negligence come into play? What is contributory negligence? Well, in any claim for negligence, there is always a consideration for whether the injured party or the aggrieved party has not taken reasonable care for their own safety.
Reasonable care for their own safety in this case is banging on the window of the car to alert them that they are there. And then when they have understood that the car has backed off and given them some space, moving into primary position.
Now, in this situation, this is applicable because if you are a road user who is injured by another road user, the court will look, first of all, whether the other road user was negligent in their duty of care to you as a road user. But then how did you act? Did you take reasonable care for yourself?
Yes.
If you didn't take reasonable care for yourself and your actions contributed to your own injury, then you are contributing to your own injury and therefore you are negligent for your own safety. Therefore, we call it contributory negligence. And if the court attributes contributory negligence to that injured party, that can be anything up to 100%, meaning the court could say, well, the driver was negligent in that they drove dangerous.
If this was in the UK and it went to court and I was the person on the bike, I would simply take a printout of the Highway Code website where it says to do exactly what the person on the bike there did.
For example, I'm not saying they did, I'm not drawing conclusions on this video, I'm just going to give you an outline here. I'll tell you that in a minute. But if the court were to say this driver broke their duty of care, they drove negligently and they put the cyclist in danger, the court would then look at, well, how much did the cyclist play in causing their own injuries? And so if the cyclist was so negligent for their own safety that that was the principal cause of their own injuries, despite the driver originally being negligent, the court might say, well, at least 80% of this injury was caused by the cyclists themselves not taking reasonable care of their own injuries. Now, a lot of people then might think that this is unfair. This is why one person commented, this is why people don't like lawyers, which I respectfully said, well, on another perspective, this is potentially why a lot of people don't like the law and think the law is unfair, because this is what the law says. If the driver's driven negligently, that's one thing. But if the cyclist was also negligent for their own safety and that was the primary cause of their injuries,
which in this case they weren't, and no, it wasn't,
then they are to be held contributory negligent to their own injuries. And that can be anything up to and including 100%, meaning although the driver was responsible, the cyclist gets nothing from the driver because the cyclist's own actions were so negligent that they caused their own injury. With all that in mind, if you followed that hopefully so far, let's go back to the video.
But before we do that, right, UK Highway Code primary position. Okay. One is the centre of the traffic stream, that is centre of the lane rather. You'll sometimes hear this called the primary position. Think of it as taking the lane. Okay, so highway code. There are two basic positions you should adopt depending on the situation. Ride in the centre of your lane to make yourself as clearly as possible. In slower moving traffic, when the traffic around you starts to move more freely, move over to the left if you can do so safely, so that faster. At the approach to junctions or road narrowings where it would be unsafe for drivers to overtake you. Highway code, uk.co.uk. I don't know if it's officially government sanctioned so that this takes precedent in law, but that is what the highway code says. It says to do exactly what the person on the bike there did. I'm slightly concerned that this lawyer didn't know that.
And let's watch that again. I'll pop it out so you can see it larger. And now keep your eye on the Range Rover coming from the back left. Now, I agree with all the commenters that this Range Rover
should never have been there
too closely to the cyclist and put the cyclist in danger. Although, many people dispute those rules, but I don't think this was taken in
Why would anybody dispute that?
Wales. But nonetheless, it's the same broad principle. So we have a minimum distance we have to leave cyclists when you pass in a vehicle. That aside,
minimum distance is 1.5 meters, which is a lot more than the distance here, which is about half that.
I do think that the Range Rover was too close to the cyclist, but let's watch what happens immediately after that. So let's walk it through. So the Range Rover is quite close to the cyclist. Cyclist is obviously aggrieved, reach out and touches the vehicle.
The cyclist isn't aggrieved, the cyclist is terrified.
To say, hey, this is too close, you're putting me in danger. Now, first of all, I absolutely do not recommend that any cyclists reach out and bang the windows of a vehicle, because that's the first stage.
I absolutely do recommend that, because you have no idea if they've seen you or not, and you have to assume that they haven't. And for all you know, and it's very possible and very likely, and a lot of people in London get killed in this way, that you have to assume that they haven't seen you. You have to assume the next thing that they're going to do is drive right across you, because you don't know that they're not.
That he puts himself in danger, because had he fallen off his bike at that point, he can hardly blame the driver of the car, because although the driver was a little bit too close, the cyclist, if pushing on the vehicle, had fallen over, having lost balance, that is not entirely the driver's fault.
Yes, it is.
It would be the driver's fault in the sense that they're too close, but now you can see this contributory negligence thing coming in. If the cyclist leaning out and banging the car did fall off, the cyclist is legally at least 80% or so responsible for their own injuries, because he...
If someone comes up to you with a loaded gun, points it at you, and you take every precaution that you can to stop yourself getting shot and fall over, then no judge is going to say that it's your own fault for trying to stop somebody shooting you. It's the same situation here. You don't know that they're not about to drive into you and possibly kill you.
Lost his own balance by reaching out and touching the vehicle, which he shouldn't have done. So that's the first bit. Obviously, he didn't fall off, but let's watch the next bit now. So now he continues. Now the point here is the cyclist continues, the driver continues. So by them both continuing, they are both contributing to what happens next. So
the person on the bike continues because they are now in front of the car, because the car slowed down. They saw that in their peripheral vision, that the car slowed down. It's perhaps unwise for them to assume and not keep on checking, but they then were in control of the lane. It was their lane. The person in the car had slowed down and they were about to take primary position, which is what you absolutely should do. There is an argument for turning around and looking. However, in those kind of situations, you don't have time to turn around and look, because the car in front of you then could have slammed their brakes on. There could be a pothole. There could be anything happening, that sometimes you just have to keep your eyes on the road in front of you and assume that what's happened behind you has continued for what was happening.
So they are both liable at this point. And just work with me here, because if the cyclist knows that this is a dangerous situation, which is evidenced by the fact that he reached out and banged on the vehicle to say this is too close, it's dangerous, because I infer that that's what the cyclist was doing, the cyclist nonetheless continued regardless of the potential risk going forward. That is legally what we term reckless.
If you stop every time there's a dangerous situation when you're cycling around a city or a town or in heavy traffic, you would never get going again.
Where you recognize that there's a danger or a risk of injury and you carry on regardless. That is reckless. And if you are reckless, you could be contributing to your own injuries, and that is contributory negligence. Let's watch the next bit again as it unfolds. So he carries on, and it's at that point there. If you see from this, I can't wind back on this, but I'll minimize it and then go back again. But you can see now the cyclist has moved in front of the vehicle.
Yes, taking the lane, primary position, as you were advised to do.
And it's only then that he gets knocked down. So if we I have to minimize it, if we wind back just very slightly, if we go to this point, just about here, he's reached out and banged the vehicle, which I don't recommend, which I think is dangerous.
Which I do, because that is the least dangerous option.
He carries on. Now at this point, he's behind the front end of the vehicle and could stop and choose.
At this point, the Range Rover should have not slammed their brakes on, but slowed right down very quickly to give that cyclist a lot of space. The person on the bike should have been afforded a lot of room there to do whatever they were going to do. This kind of thinking that the person on the bike needs to take responsibility is a lot of motor normative thinking.
Chooses not to. Now, many people will say, well, he shouldn't have to stop. Well, if it's a choice between stopping and being safe and just let the car go and stopping and being safe, or carrying on and risking breaking your legs or whatever, then the sensible thing would be to stop.
I accept the point. However, you would be stopping all the time. When you're weaving through traffic, when you have a car that's near you, a lot of times it's very difficult to stop because then you can't start again. Most people on bikes like this are clipped in, where it's difficult to then get clipped back in. There are lots of reasons why you don't want to stop, and a lot of them are to do with being as safe as possible. Some things that aren't advisable on the bike are the safest option.
That's what a court would say. The sensible thing would be to stop. It is incumbent at all times on every road user to take reasonable care for their own safety. Yes, I still think the driver was too close by any standards, and the driver could have stopped as well. So this is not to say the driver is not responsible, but this video really is for those that don't understand why the cyclist might be responsible for their own injuries. And then so from this point, the cyclist is behind the front of the vehicle, but then when we play the video forwards, the cyclist carries on and moves over, drifts in front. Now you can see then at that point the driver does apply the brakes. You can see the brake lights come on because the driver has realized that the cyclist has moved in front, but the cyclist moved in front of the vehicle. So that broadly is why the cyclist is, I would say, at least 80% responsible for their own injuries here.
Thoroughly disagree with that. Range Rover had no business being where they were. As soon as, if they didn't know the bike was there, then as soon as they were alerted to it by having the person bang on the window, they should have backed off, given lots of room. And if they did know they were there, then they were entirely responsible. From then on, the argument that the bike could have stopped, they could have stopped, I guess. But again, it was probably more safe to continue, because stopping, you don't know then if somebody, including the Range Rover, is just going to drive into the back of you anyway, which is what happened eventually, but shouldn't have happened. So weighing the safety up, it's very, very unsafe to ride a bike around cars when there are people operating 2 or 3 ton machines without proper responsibility, without the skills to be able to operate them and move them safely around much more vulnerable road users.
The 20% is that the driver could have stopped earlier on, and the driver should have been aware that the cyclist was there, and so on and so forth. But but for the cyclist going forwards and moving across in front of the vehicle, he wouldn't have got knocked down. So let me know in the comments if that's what you expect, because that's how the law would break this down. They both have a duty to.
This guy's a barrister, and I'm certainly not a barrister stroke lawyer or understand the law in the same way that he does, but I absolutely do not think the law or a court would break it down in that way, because the person on the bike, the vulnerable road user, as opposed to the person in the car, completely not vulnerable at all, were doing everything they could to stay as safe as possible around the hazards that were presented. And the person in the car caused it in the first place and then did nothing to avoid it after that. The person on the bike were doing everything they could to avoid the situation becoming even more unsafe and to make it more safe.
Each other, and a responsibility for their own safety. And so the driver was wrong by being too close, but the cyclist was wrong by reaching out and touching him. They were both wrong by continuing forwards, and the cyclist was wrong, in my view, in the worst, in this scenario, by drifting in front of the vehicle, and then it got knocked down.
Didn't drift.
So broadly speaking, that's how I assess the situation. So they are both in the wrong, and the cyclist has contributed to their own injuries. Again, let me know in the comments if that's what you think, if that's what you'd understood. And remember, this is always open to some interpretation. Different judges will look at it slightly differently, but very broadly speaking, that is the analysis that any court is going to go through. I appreciate this is not from England and Wales, but if it were, that's how the court would look at it.
So yeah, very interesting video. As I say, I cycle around cars in traffic, I drive around bikes in traffic, and if you are sat in a 2-ton box of metal, you are fully protected. The worst that's going to happen to you is a bike is going to scratch your paintwork. If you are sat on a 8-kilogram bit of aluminium or carbon fibre with absolutely no protection around you, then everybody else around you has a duty of care towards you. You expect them to have the skills and be able to operate their machines to keep you safe. That person in the Range Rover shouldn't have been anywhere near the bike in the first place. But then when that situation happened, then the person on the bike did broadly what I would do, which is follow the official guidance by the Highway Code UK. I don't know if that's official in law, but that's what everybody who's on the bike should be riding towards. Thanks. That's my take on things. I appreciate lots of people are going to disagree with that, but I think if you don't look at it like that, to me, then it's motor normative thinking. It's this whole 70-year cycle of putting vulnerable road users and non-vulnerable road users in the same bracket, and then requiring the same level of care and responsibility from them, when in reality it's just not the case. Thanks for watching. Bye.